Hello guys, and welcome back to another episode of Sounds Motor Machine, and you join me here sat in my 2011 Range Rover Vogue 4.4 TDV8. So this episode is going to be all about upgrading the audio system in the Range Rover, making it even better and making it sound absolutely fantastic, hopefully. But before we get onto that, I just want to do a quick follow-up to last week's video, which was the engine servicing and all the work that I did with the cleaning of the intake manifold and all that stuff. Hopefully you guys have seen that video already. If not, click up here and you can watch it now or add it to your watch list to watch later. But anyway, in that video, what I did was remove the inlet manifold, the donut-shaped pipe from the top of the Range Rover's engine, and cleaned it out thoroughly. Because over the 200,000 miles that the Range Rover had accrued, it had built up about half an inch layer of crusty, black, oily muck on the inside of the whole pipe, which took a serious amount of cleaning to get out. And I also changed the oil in the Range Rover and changed the grade of the oil as well, from 5W30 C1 to a 5W40 A3 B4. So I'm not going to explain again why I did that in this video. Again, you can click up here to watch that video and see my full explanation on why I did that. But I just wanted to give you guys a quick update because I've just literally come back from a 400-mile round trip over to Bath and back to here in the southeast of the UK, and the Range Rover is running like it never has before. So not only does the Range Rover feel a lot more responsive than before from the very low end of the RPM range, it's picking up really absolutely effortless. It was effortless before, but now it's just absolutely unreal. As well as that, the fuel economy seems to have improved from the last time I did a long run, which was from Holyhead, the port, down to here in the southeast. My average miles per gallon had been running for a while in this car at around 28-29 miles per gallon, which isn't horrendous, but for a 4.4 TDV it's not great either. And you have to take into account also that I have the roof rack on top and 33-inch all-terrain tyres as well, so that'll have an effect. But on this run that I've just done this weekend from here to Bath and back, the Range Rover averaged 33.5 miles per gallon without even trying. That was going through all the normal traffic that you get on the M25, a variety of speeds, cruising from anywhere from about 60 all the way up to stretches where I'm doing well over 70. And the result of all that was 33.5 miles per gallon indicated on the dash. But anyway, all of that is to say that the work that I did under the bonnet, something that I did, had a very good effect on the car. And those two changes, having better response low down and better fuel economy, I think I'm going to put down to cleaning the map sensor in the top of the inlet manifold. Now hopefully you guys will have seen what it looked like in the video, but it was absolutely clogged with black gunge. So I've got no idea how that map sensor was still working or how it didn't throw a fault on the dashboard, but it was basically completely sealed with muck. So now that I've cleaned that out, presumably it's seeing the correct inlet manifold pressure and the fueling is working just that much better in response, which is giving rise to better fuel economy and better response. So hopefully that gain will be long term now, and as long as I keep that sensor clean, it should continue to run as it is now, which is great. And the third thing that I've noticed is that the 4.4 TDV8 really seems to enjoy that 5W40 engine oil that I put into it. Since I've owned this car, I've always been fairly impressed by how quiet and well refined the 4.4 TDV8 is, but since changing to that 5W40 engine oil, the idle of this car now is literally like a sewing machine. The overall kind of rattle that you get from a big diesel engine has kind of just been dulled down and quietened, and that stays the same even when the engine's up to fully operating temperature and the oil's nice and hot. It still sounds lovely and quiet just because that oil is that little bit thicker. So in my opinion, from what I've seen so far, it's definitely been a good decision to change this particular car to 5W40. Before you go out and buy some 5W40 for your car though, if you're running a 4.4 TDV8 or anything with DPF, if your car is still running all of its emission controls equipment as it was when it left the factory, you can't use that grade of A3 B4 oil. You've got to still use the C1 low SAPS engine oil. But if you're running a 3.6 TDV8 or a 2.7 or a 3 litre, in my opinion, there's not really any reason not to go for a 5W40 oil over the 5W30. But because of the nature of engine oil, I don't want you guys to take my advice as read. Do your own research and maybe try it out yourself for one oil change and see what you think. But from the experience I've had so far with this car, just that 400 or 500 miles that I've done since I've changed it to the 5W40, I think I'm going to be sticking with it from now on. Anyway, now we've got that out of the way, onto the topic for today's video. So you guys have already seen that I've done a little bit of work last year on the infotainment system of the Range Rover, where we added the Unique Auto Developments CarPlay and Android Auto kit to the standard Range Rover head unit. And I've been absolutely loving that over the last year or so. It's been working absolutely faultlessly, and I'm really happy with the way it basically updates the interior of the Range Rover to give, for myself, full Apple CarPlay interaction on the factory display here. And yeah, I absolutely love it. However, there's still room for improvement on the Range Rover system as a whole. Now, the Logic 7 system that I have here in the Range Rover was the standard fit system for cars that were built between 2009 and 2012. Above the Logic 7 system was the Logic 7 HD, which I've not tried, but this car, as I said, has Logic 7, and it's all right. It's not the best, it's not the worst, but it's pretty good. I've been lucky enough to own quite a few cars in my driving career. At the last count, it was about 35 or 40. One day I'll probably do a video on that and go through all my car history, but I've also been lucky enough to have quite a few cars with very good audio systems. Just off the top of my head, I've had a Lexus IS 2007 with a 14-speaker Mark Levinson audio system, which was absolutely fantastic. I've also had a Lexus LS 400 from the year 1998, again with a Mark Levinson system in it. That was, again, very, very good. And I've had a couple of Volvos with the Dolby Pro Logic 2 surround system in those, and again, that's an awesome system. The Range Rover probably comes in about 4th or 5th after those cars that I mentioned. As I said, it's a very decent system, but it's not amazing. So what I want to try and do in this video is to try and address some of the issues that I find there are with this Logic 7 system, and to try and do it all in a measurable way so I can share the results with you guys. And so to that end, I've invested some of my YouTube bucks into a Mini-DSP U-Mic 1, which is a measurement microphone, which we're going to be using to actually physically measure the sound the Range Rover audio system is making, and then we'll be able to use that data to compare before and after all of the changes I'm going to make today. Just on the note of spending my YouTube bucks, I do have a little announcement for you guys, which is that I've officially started offering channel memberships. If you aren't too familiar with channel memberships, it's a way for viewers like you to support and get to know creators like me, whilst getting a few extra members only perks at the same time. So if my videos have kept you entertained on a lazy Sunday morning, or helped you save money by servicing or repairing your own Landy, and you want to make that extra step to say thank you, then I'd really appreciate it if you'd consider hitting that join button and finding out more about channel membership. Regardless of if you join or not though, I'm very grateful for all of your support and lovely comments that I get every week, and I'm looking forward to taking on new projects this year and making more useful, enjoyable content for you. Anyway, back to the video. Now, this is my first time doing anything like this with audio measurement. It's an area that I've been interested in a while to get into and to learn about, so hopefully I can do that whilst I'm teaching you guys a little bit about it at the same time as well. But anyway, I think what we should do first is take a baseline measurement of what the system sounds like now, so we've got something to compare against after I make all the changes. So let's get set up with the laptop and see what it does. So I'm set up in the Range Rover, ready to take my first measurement. I've got my little U-Mic 1 set up here, calibrated mic. And I've just applied the calibration file to it that you download from Mini-DSP's website, and I've got it arranged in like a 90-degree orientation. Ideally, I would have wanted it kind of exactly where my ear is, but where it is at the moment, it's fairly central in the car while not being too far away from my listening position, so I think this is going to work pretty well for what we're trying to do. So what I've got here is my laptop running software called REW, which is Room EQ Wizard, which is some free software that we can use to take measurements and to visualize them and save the data out, so I can show you guys the data afterwards. And then my laptop is connected to the Range Rover's audio system using a 3.5mm aux cable, so it's plugged into the aux port down there in the back. And we're going to be using the laptop to generate a signal which will be fed into the Land Rover speaker system and then read back by the microphone here, which is a calibrated microphone. So in that way, we've got a closed loop system where the REW software can actually measure the sound being produced by the system on test. So basically what's going to happen is the laptop is going to generate a frequency sweep, which basically means it's going to start at 20 Hertz, which is the lowest the human ear can detect, and run all the way up to 20,000 Hertz, which is the highest your ear can detect if your hearing is in perfect condition. I know mine is certainly not at this stage. At the same time it does that, the microphone is going to be listening in and recording, and then we'll get the data displayed on our screen. So let's give it a go. So here we go, here's our first plot we've just got. So this is the data that's been fed back to the laptop by the microphone. And there we go, so that is showing us our frequency response of the complete system in the Range Rover. So I need to preface everything I'm saying here by saying I'm not an acoustic engineer, I'm a mechanical engineer who happens to be interested in acoustic stuff. And I've just really started getting into it and learning for projects like this and home audio and stuff like that. So I'm not an expert by any means at all, I'm a beginner. So I'm going to explain to you guys I think what I can see here and what I'm going to try and do about it. Also, if there are any acoustic engineers or audio engineers out there watching this video, please leave a comment down below to let me know what I'm doing wrong. I'm sure I'm doing loads of stuff wrong, and if you notice anything on the data here as I'm showing it you, please make a comment below and let me know what you can see, because as I said, I'm no expert. But Anyway, what can I see on this graph? First thing I'm seeing as I look at this graph is it looks like we've got a reasonably flat response between about 40 hertz and up to about 1 kilohertz. There are some dips and valleys in between, but over the sort of 800, 900 hertz frequency up here, it seems like we're dropping off quite sharply. We've also got, as you'll see, a really big dip in the frequency response here between around 110 hertz and 170, 180 hertz. And the reason that's not very good is actually because that's the frequency response of quite a lot of male singing voices. So I think it's like a baritone or maybe a bass male singing voice is going to be in that kind of frequency range. So what that means for listening to music is that voices in that kind of frequency response are going to sound a bit muted and dull compared to the rest of the music, which isn't good. So then below that, it's actually not looking too bad as well at first glance. It's actually responded better than I thought it might have done. It kind of seems to roll off at around 40 hertz, but there is still some response, like a decent amount down to as low as 30 hertz, which is actually way lower than I thought it was going to be. And then above kind of 900 hertz, it rolls off quite sharply in the treble region, which isn't great. And I expect that's probably because the tweeters in this car are a bit weak and it's not really responding in that high frequency in the way it should. See, that's our baseline run. What I'm going to do now is actually run this about another 3 or 4 times just to give us a good average, and then I'll combine those together and we'll have a good average run of our baseline audio setup. So, there's a lot to take in with that measurement, and it's really crucial that I get the measurements right in order to have any kind of bearing on what the real world is or how it sounds to your ears. So, but I think what that's kind of showed me or told me is that the system in the Range Rover is really lacking in the kind of mids to the highs. So from about 8 or 900 hertz upwards, it's really quite low compared to the low mids and the bass and the sub bass. And the sub bass and the bass are actually pretty good. They actually respond pretty well. Like all the way down to 30 hertz is pretty audible at this sound power level anyway. I think the problem that we're going to encounter with the bass in the Range Rover, and the one that I do encounter actually on the road, is that it responds okay at those lower levels, but the subwoofer starts to struggle as you increase the volume up. So when you're driving down the road, even though the Range Rover is quite a quiet car really, the audio system has to kind of fight against the road noise and anything that's going on, any of the noises that are coming into the car basically. And when you're on the road, there's quite a lot of low frequencies that come up from road noise and wind noise. They're all quite low down. So you end up turning the volume up more so you can hear the music properly. But when you do that, the subwoofer I think starts to struggle at those higher volumes. It starts to distort a little bit and it doesn't really sound that good. And I think the same applies for the 6.5-inch woofers in the doors as well. So to begin improving the situation, the first thing that I'm going to be changing is the front door speakers. So I got myself this Audison APK165 set, crucially in 2 ohms, as that's the same as the Range Rover speakers are a standard. They're a 2 ohm system, which is a bit unusual. Most car speakers would be 4 ohms. So this is a 2-way system that I'm going to use to replace the woofer and the tweeter in both the front doors on the Range Rover. Now this system comes with a crossover for both the woofer and the tweeters, and I'm not sure if we're going to use these or not because I'm also not sure whether the Range Rover has them built in as standard. We don't want to add a crossover on top of another crossover, that would just get really messy. So I need to find out if there actually are any in here. If there are, possibly remove them, but if that's too much trouble we might just leave them as they are and then just run the Audison speakers directly to the cables as the existing speakers are. So my car, being the lowly Vogue spec, came with the Logic 7 audio system, which is a 14 speaker 720 watt total output system I think, which probably sounds more impressive than the system actually is. So in terms of speakers, what we've actually got is a woofer, a mid and a treble in each front door, and then there's also a centre channel speaker in the dashboard there, and then we've got another low and another mid in each rear door, and then in the very back we've got another 6.5-inch woofer in each D pillar, and then in the boot of the Range Rover we've got a subwoofer which is tucked away in that bulge there. And we're going to be looking at that later on. Now, over 2 years ago, when I changed the seats and the door cards in my Range Rover, I actually gave myself an unwitting audio upgrade. Now, I didn't realise this until recently, but on these door cards, the mid speaker is actually integrated into the door card itself. So when I fitted these autobiography door cards to the Range Rover, I actually fitted an autobiography spec or Logic 7 HD mid speaker as well. So all 4 of my door cards have got Logic 7 HD mid speakers in, all wired up. So on the Logic 7 system, instead of a full range speaker like this, all you get is actually another tweeter. So there's basically a tweeter here and another one at the top of the door on the standard system. So I'm not actually replacing this speaker today, and hopefully it's going to work really well with the replacement Audison low and tweeter at the top. Fingers crossed. But before we tear into the Range's sound system, AUTODOC is doing a winter prize draw, meaning you could win up to £1,000 just by ordering your service items or parts off their website. So stop putting that oil change off, because all you've got to do to enter the giveaway is sign into your autodoc.co.uk account, then head over to the contest page and enter your email address to sign up for the AUTODOC newsletter. Once you've done that, simply place an order for your much needed service items, oil, parts or tools, and then head over to the AUTODOC Instagram page on Monday the 25th of March to see if you're a lucky winner. There are 10 prizes up for grabs, with first place being a huge £1,000 coupon with which you could do a huge amount of work on your Range Rover or other car, and then there are £700 and £300 coupons to win with a load more as well. Entries for this prize draw end on the 18th of March 2024, so like I said, stop putting off that oil change or brake job and get your order in now. Anyway, back to the Rangey. Okay, we've got to disconnect the door pull like that, and that will reveal all of the connections inside for the various speakers and switches and stuff. So here's our door pull, here's our mid-range speaker, and little LED wires. Here's our big lowest frequency speaker, and then the connection up here for the top. So I'm just going to disconnect everything. So we'll take the door card away. There's one autobiography door card done with for now. And then once the door card's off, this trim comes off fairly easily, which will reveal our tweeter behind. So we're going to need to keep all of these bits, even though we're going to be changing the tweeters. We want to try and make it integrate as neatly as possible into the original sails as we can. So yeah, let's get this all out of the way, and then we'll take off what we've got here and have a look at it on the bench. This speaker's definitely not completely failed, although like with all speakers, the compliant rubber outer starts to sort of go brittle over time, and if you look at how dirty the speaker is, car audio speakers really don't have an easy life, so definitely a good thing to replace them. Because the thing is that really, as good as this speaker might have been when it was brand new, that's over 13 years ago now that that was fitted, so over time speakers, like everything else, do break down. And even if, as I suspect, these speakers were only used to play the Archers occasionally on a Sunday afternoon, the speakers age over time, so even if they weren't hammered to death using drum and bass music, they just age over time. So it's not surprising that the L322's sound system isn't sounding at its best. Okay, there's our original XQM 500 420, weedy little magnet, and a paper cone, pretty much standard fare. But it does say on there Land Rover, Harman Kardon, Logic 7, so there you go. And then the tweeter's held in with two rather large Torxes, which I think are actually also holding in the wing mirror, or at least two of them are. I have to be careful the wing mirror doesn't drop off when I'm taking these out. Okay, so the bottom one doesn't need to come out. So here on the bench we've got our old and our new replacements. You can see there's no size difference really between the actual woofers, just that this is a much higher quality item, and obviously it's brand new, which helps it a lot. So yeah, there's our Audison APK165 setup. There's our tweeter. And all we've got to do basically is make this fit into this plastic, and this tweeter fit where this was sitting inside the sail on the door. So A little bit of work to do. Now unfortunately, the process of fitting these Audison speakers into these plastic rings is kind of destructive for these original speakers. You probably would be able to put them back together again if you wanted to, but what we've got to do is peel off this outer foam interface ring, like that. You probably could glue that back on actually, if you wanted to reverse it. And that reveals these 4 screws which are holding the actual speaker into this housing. So on these original speakers, the connections were actually soldered directly to the plug. So all we need to do is just heat our soldering iron up, heat this up, and we should be able to pull it off. So now we've taken off the connections on the back, they're free, and the screws are out. The speaker's actually still not free to come out. It's actually glued in with kind of a silicone sealant. So we need to prise it up gently. I mean, not too gently, as we're obviously not going to reuse this speaker, but we don't want to damage the housing itself. So you can hear that's kind of releasing as I prise on it. It's pretty well stuck on there. Okay. There's our original driver out. So all we're going to have to do is connect up the inputs for the Prima AP6.5 to the original connector here, just using some very short lengths of wire. And I just want to check before I do that to make sure that the positive and negative are the same side on this as they are on the actual speaker itself, because they might be reversed, of course. So we'll have a quick look. It's positive on this side for the speaker. And I'll just go and check the plug to make sure this is the right way around. So if we check the original workshop manual, it's got wiring diagrams for the speaker system. And I can see that the speaker base front door right, which is the one we're working on, has yellow and black and green and black, and the green and black wire is on the positive side of the speaker. So that is correct. The positive side will go to the positive side of this Audison speaker as long as we connect them up left to left and right to right. Happy days. You can see that this Audison APK speaker fits pretty beautifully in the original housing, and that is because this range of Audison Prima speakers, they're actually designed for OEM replacement, so they're designed to be the kind of size and shape that fits nicely into OEM housings. So there we go, I've got the Prima connected up to the original connector blocks using 2 decent bits of wire there, just soldered into position. And the good thing about this is we're still using the factory plug, and this means that any changes we're doing are fully reversible in the future if I wanted to change it back, but this should work really nicely for what we're doing. So the next thing I want to look at is this tweeter setup. This is the original Harman Kardon tweeter, and I actually just noticed it's slightly dented on the cap there. It's definitely not something I did. Whether that was done when I changed over the door cards or at some other point in the past, I don't know, but that definitely won't be helping the sound. And you can see this is pre-wired, directly soldered onto the back of the little tweeter speaker there. It goes to this nice plug. And we definitely want to keep this plug at the car end, again, so we don't have to make any changes to the car's wiring. So I've just cut off some of that foam stuff and the little bit of heat shrink that was around it. And what we've revealed is this little 4.7 microfarad capacitor, which is in line on the positive line there to the tweeter. Now I think the reason that they've done this is because both the tweeter and the mid-range speaker on the Range Rover are both on the same channel. If you look at the wiring diagram, which I'll put up on the screen, the tweeter is basically teed off from the feed for the mid-range speaker, so effectively both of these speakers will be receiving the same signal from the amplifier. So I think the reason they've put this little single capacitor in line with the tweeter is to act as a kind of very basic passive crossover, and also as a bit of a protection for the tweeter to stop it from receiving too many high energy, low frequency signals basically. So it's a little bit of a bodge in a way, but I guess it kind of works because the Audison setup that we got here came with some rather nice passive crossovers which are going to be used for the tweeters. And these crossovers also have a little mode switch here, which is basically a boost that you can apply if your tweeter is positioned behind a grille, as it is here in the Range Rover. So we'll probably use it with that boost turned on. So what that means for our wiring is basically I want to keep the plug, but I don't want to keep anything else from here off. So what I think I'm going to do is just cut the wiring off here, and then we'll connect it to our Audison crossover, find somewhere to hide this in the door and stick it on somewhere nicely out of the way, and then we'll connect our speaker, our tweeter, to this crossover. So that's the plan. So with the tweeter, this is basically the little foam mounting piece that fits in the corner of the door. And what we're going to be doing is basically using the little enclosure that comes with the tweeter, which is normally used as like kind of a plinth, I guess, to sit on top of a dash. We're going to wedge this in here, and I'm probably going to hot glue this in to try and get the tweeter to angle back towards the driver a bit like that. So it should sit. In fact, we could want as much angle as we can get to get this pointing back towards the driver. And the same for the passenger on the left-hand side. Basically, with the high-frequency speakers, they're particularly directional, so the better you can get them pointing at your listening position, the better for the audio sound. So I think we'll get this to a position where we like. We've obviously got to drill some holes for the cables to go through the back, and then what I'll do, once we've figured out exactly where they need to go, I'm going to hot glue these in place, and that should keep them nicely where they need to be with no vibrations, etc. So yeah. So something like this orientation is going to be what we're going to go for. It's angled back nicely towards the driver. If you think it's sat in the door normally like this, the driver's going to be sat kind of in line with that. So yeah, that should sound pretty nice. And I've also just realised there's a space back here which is almost made to measure for our little crossover here for the tweeter. So that's going to make it really neat and tidy, really hidden away, and make this cable run nice and short as well. So happy days. So for this input wiring, we don't need it to be anywhere near as long as this, because basically the plug sits pretty much like this in the car. It plugs in there. So we can short this right down, and then we will crimp and heat shrink this connector back on again, and it should look pretty much factory from the outside. So with that, we're pretty much ready to put the speakers back into the door and then try them out before we put the door card back on again. But before I do all that, there's one more thing I want to do whilst we've got the door card off. And that is put a little bit more of this mass-loaded vinyl, which is basically just meant to stop panels from resonating, and I want to stick some of that to the inside of the door skin of the Range Rover. There is actually some in there already from the factory, but it's not very much. And if you listen as I tap the door skin from the outside, it's fairly dead, but there is definitely some improvement to be made there. And we can see that there is some factory stuff in there already, so I just want to add a bit more over here, maybe a bit more towards behind the back side of the speaker, but it's not going to be a huge amount, so just a couple of little squares. That's my first panel on there, just kind of extending what the factory did. The stuff that I'm using is also a bit thicker and therefore a bit heavier, so it'll work a little bit better. That should help deaden this door panel down a little bit. So that's going to sit in there. Yeah, that should. And it might not seem like much, but that'll definitely help a little bit and help the low frequencies of this speaker to extend a little bit better. Okay, so we're ready now to pop our Audison speaker, our low frequency one, back in. Okay, and then what we're going to do is pop our original factory connector back in again. And there we go. That's that speaker installed. And that, even if I say so myself, is a very neat install of a aftermarket speaker. Short blast of copyright music. Hopefully it'll be alright. Sing your own melody, even if it's that's already sounding pretty awesome. I'm really happy with how this woofer is sounding so far. It's sounding really, really punchy and tight, and the highs are sounding very, very nice and crisp as well. Sorted. So that's one door done with pretty positive results so far. I've got my fingers crossed this is actually going to make a pretty good difference. Got a nice woofer in the bottom there. Audison tweeter just there, which you can just about see through the mesh, which is quite nice. And we've got our little crossover hidden away for the tweeter just behind the foam in here, which is really, really good. Very neat indeed. Right, just got to do the other side now. So as well as picking up the UMic 1 professional calibrated microphone here, I've also recently picked up these new wireless microphones just for general recording duties. These are meant to have fairly good audio quality, so I thought I'd give you guys a little demo of what the system sounds like now with some copyright-free music. So here we go. So yeah, sounding pretty good now, and I've definitely noticed an improvement in the mids and the highs. They've definitely been brought up a lot by these new tweeters. And the data would seem to agree with me. After testing it again with the UMic 1, a definite improvement can be seen on the red graph, showing a big boost in the frequencies above 1 kHz and a reduction in that dip that we saw in the 180 Hz region. The mid-highs and the highs are still a little low compared to the bass and sub-bass, so it seems like some of the problem at least is caused by the Logic 7 amplifier, which would need to be corrected by altering the equalizer settings or by using a DSP. Next week we're going to be focusing on the subwoofer at the back of the Rangy, making more improvements and more measurements, and honing in on that perfect sounding audio system. So please remember to click the like button if you enjoyed the video, it really helps out with the YouTube numbers game. Subscribe if you haven't already. Check out my new YouTube channel memberships below if you want to help support more videos like this, and I'll see you next time.